lecture, an important lecture about the update in the European Union regulation. First of all, before I introduce our speaker, Dr. Samad Tabba, just I will let you know that the lecture is recorded and it will be uploaded in the IVPN library after that, so people can share it to other people, and you can look after it at any time. And also, like the lecture maybe will last for an hour and a half. So or an hour. So any question you can ask it like at the end of the lecture.
Yes, and hour and 20 minutes now.
Okay. So let's give me like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Samad Tabba, holds a bachelor degree in the medical laboratory technology from the American University of Beirut and a PharmD in clinical pharmacy from the Lebanese American University. She is currently the co-founder and the CEO of the Medical Agency for Research and Statistics, MARS. After graduation, Dr. Tabba held a position as a chief pharmacist at the World Health Organization Beirut office. Also, she participated in a number of projects for the Ministry of Health. She has been also involved in clinical research, more specifically in training workshop carried out at the national and regional level in the delivery of sessions on different aspects of the conduct of clinical research, as well as in the conduction of different clinical research projects. She is the author of many scientific papers published in peer-reviewed journals, as well as a booklet titled The Clinical Research Process from Initiation to Publication. She is an editorial member of 2 peer-reviewed scientific journals. She is also an assistant professor at the University Institute for Nursing, Lebanese Red Cross, where she delivers pharmacology, microbiology, and clinical research courses. She is lately appointed as the Global Pharmacovigilance Society Ambassador of Lebanon, where she also acts as an acting board member of the society. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sama, for your participation with our clinical research listserv, and it's our pleasure to be with us today, and the floor of yours.
Habibti Nagam, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for your introduction. Thank you so much for your invitation. And it's always an honor to be part of your wonderful activities. I want to highlight something. The research listserv under the leadership of Dr. Nagam is really, really one of the best. And it is #1 in the list of all the listservs in IVPN network. It has been over all the period where she was a leader, have been doing many great activities, and one of them is this. I want to thank you again, Nagam, and blessed efforts. Your efforts are really recognizable. Habibti. Let me first begin by sharing the screen. I want to welcome everybody. Please, Nagam, when you see the screen, tell me when it is. I'm enlarging its slideshow. You can see it now?
Yes.
Okay, Habibti. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much. It's a Sunday. It may be your day off, and you have vacation today, but I really appreciate your presence. Our topic today, it's about the new European Union clinical trial regulation. We always discuss topics in general about clinical trials, about regulations, and always we talk in general about the regulations in our Arab, Middle Eastern countries, the Arab region, and maybe United States, but few lectures have been delivered about the clinical trial regulation in the European Union. Why is that? Because why is it important? Because the European Union has its a specific geographical consideration due to the unity of all the countries together. I will present that in the presentation, and I will talk in general first about the European Union in general, its geography, its political, a very slight introduction about its political connection, and then we will go, because this affects the clinical trial regulation. It is the base to our discussion later on in this lecture. Please, if you have any question, you can type it in the chat box, and Dr. Nagam can share it with us at the end of the session. Once again, I welcome you to our webinar, and you really are welcome. We will talk about an introduction about the topic, then which is about the European Union European Union geography. Then we will talk about clinical trials in Europe in Europe, in the European Union, history of the clinical research legislation, overview of the directive. We will talk about directive versus regulation. Maybe you have noticed in the titles that we have provided in the posters, we have directive and regulation. So there is a misconception between both, and there is a big difference between both, okay? Then we will talk about the regulation, okay? So the purpose of the regulation, there was a directive which is replaced by a regulation, the purpose of the regulation, and then key changes from the directive to the regulation. This is very important topic. Why? Because according to the companies, if you want to work in any pharmaceutical company, which is based, which has branches in Europe, which delivers its drugs to European countries, distributes them, you have to know these rules and these regulations, okay? And then we will talk about the clinical trial information system, which is the CTIS, which is the new feature for the regulation, which was not found in the directive. Don't worry, the topics are big, they seem to be complex, but they are so simple and so easy, and they are common topics. You all know them definitely, as long as you have registered to this lecture, you have a background on definitely clinical trials. They are just new, okay? And they are not common in our countries, in our areas, in the Far East or in America, okay, USA, okay? And then finally, we will talk about the clinical trial application. This is the system, the CTIS, where they apply the CTA and the process of it. Why you have to know the process? Again, if you work in any company, even if it is based in the Middle East, some companies are European companies, okay? So you have to know the rules and the regulations for getting marketing authorization for these medications, okay? So let us now push the on button and let us go to our first topic, which is general principles and concepts about the European Union. Why I do present this slide or this section, which is the introduction about European Union, because 1 year ago, I was presenting this topic, and in the middle of the presentation, I've noticed that the attendees were misled, or they were lost. What are the member states? What's the meaning of a member state? What's the meaning of the European Commission? Why is the European Parliament involved in this? So the Europe continent, it has a special a state of itself, okay? It has a special consideration. Geographically, it's different from any other. Politically, it's different from any other. So you have to understand its strategy or its logistics, and then you can understand why things are being carried this way, okay? The European Union was originally, there was first Europe and many countries in it. After the wars, and there were many wars, especially in Europe, World War I, World War II, there they wanted to end these wars. They wanted to end all the bloody wars between these neighbors. Therefore, after the Second World War, they have came with the idea of the European Union, okay? The name European Union, first, it replaced something which was first called the European Economic Community. So after the war, they decided to have a certain economic community in order to make it easier for them to distribute food, to distribute everything, gas, the gasoline, etc. So they made something called the European Economic Community, and after that, it was replaced by something called the European Union. But the idea is the same, okay? It is getting neighbor countries together. We will see how. Countries in the European Union are called member states. So now when we want to explain the clinical trial regulation or directive, when we mention the word member states, it means countries, but not any countries in Europe, countries only in the European Union, because now we will see that not all countries in Europe are within the European Union, okay? So countries in the European Union are called member states, and the European Union, it is a state, it's a political state and economic union. What is common between them, it is the economy and the politics. Their cultures, their rules, their national anthem, their civilization. Each country has its own rules, its own independence, everything. What is common between them is the politics and the economy, okay? The European Union consists of 27 member states, and remember, member states are countries. 27 member states. Okay, this is the map of Europe, and we have all these countries. I will not mention them because there are so many. All these countries which have this icon, location icon, are within the European Union, okay, or belong to the European Union. They are 27 countries, and this is the flag of the European Union. Therefore, these countries, anything we are going to talk about today applies only to these countries. If you see, there are other countries, these ones in white, this one, these ones, all of these which are in white are still not a European Union country. So this regulation or directive or everything related to this lecture does not apply to them. Okay. For example, we have candidate countries. In this slide, we have already the member states which are within the European Union. Now, candidate countries on the road to become European Union. In order to become a European Union country, you have to apply for that. You have a whole file, you have rules and regulations or criteria you have to be set up for this criteria in order to be a candidate working or on the road to European Union. And these are Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, North Macedonia, and Turkey. And Turkey is working hardly on this file in order to become part of the European Union. Therefore, if you work in any company which belongs to these countries, you have to know that someday you will switch to the European Union, and you have to know this rule and this regulation. Okay? Potential candidates to become a European Union, these are countries which still didn't apply to this file, are not working on this file, but they are making negotiations in order to get the application. Okay, so you have to negotiate to get the application. After you get the application, as you are applying to a university, you get the application, and then you fill in this application with the conditions and criteria in order to be candidate. So the potential countries are Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Kosovo. These two countries. Okay. Now, which countries do not belong to the European Union? Meaning that any medication, any clinical trials being carried out in these countries which do not belong to the European Union do not abide by what I am going to explain today. The 16 non-European Union countries are the following: Iceland, Norway, UK. UK belonged to the European Union for a very long time, but according to Brexit, when Great Britain exited from the European Union, its exit took place in 2020, and it doesn't belong anymore to the European Union. And anything which applies to the rules of the clinical trials in the European Union now do not apply, and the United Kingdom has a system by itself, another system which is totally different from the European Union clinical trial system. Okay. Andorra, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Vatican, San Marino, Belarus, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia. All of these are 16 non-European Union countries, and thus everything today does not apply to them. Okay. Now, who are the principal decision-making bodies in the European Union? So before I tell you that, we have to consider or imagine the European Union countries. They are one country, as if they are one big country, which have the same political rules, the same very similar political rules, not 100%, 90% of their political rules are the same politically. They make the same treaties with other countries, and they have the same economy, as well as they have the same bodies or the same people who put the rules. Okay, so these decision-making bodies, the 7 bodies, are the ones which put all the rules and everything and the laws for the big country, which is called European Union, which is divided in small independent countries which have their own rules and regulations in other states of life. Okay, why are we going to look at these European Union decision-making bodies? Because these bodies are the ones which have put the directive, European Union clinical trial directive. They are the ones which have changed it from the directive to regulation. They are the ones now who are monitoring this application or implementation of this regulation. Okay, First one is the European Commission, and I will explain very briefly each one, which is what it is. The European Parliament, the Council of the European Union, European Council, Court of Justice of the European Union, European Central Bank, and the European Court of Auditors. 7 bodies were the ones who worked on this regulation and were the ones who and are the ones who really regulate every economic and healthcare aspect in the European Union. Okay, the European Commission, it has an executive or a managerial position, and it is the one which draws proposals for new regulations. Therefore, any new proposal, any proposal to change from a directive, and I will explain, don't worry, what is a directive and what is a regulation, I will explain everything. But the idea is that who proposed the idea to change from a directive to a regulation? It was the European Commission. All of their job is to propose an idea, okay? And when the decision is taken to implement the idea, they are the one to implement the decision, okay? Then we have the council. They have legislative, meaning that they put the rules, and the Council of European Union is made up of all the government ministers of each European Union country. Therefore, each country has a minister, government minister. He is a member of the Council of the European Union. Therefore, any rule or decision is taken with the agreement of everyone. Okay. Now, the other body is the third body is the European Parliament. The European Parliament also has a legislative role, and it is elected by all people in Europe. In Lebanon, 2 months ago, we were electing, 1 month ago, we had elections, parliament elections, 128 parliament members. Okay, now in Europe also, it is made, I think, 560 members, because don't forget 27 countries, and from each country, many members are elected. So this is the European Parliament. Also, we have role in voting for the rules, okay, and the regulations and the directives. Then we have the European Council. Also, it have a legislative, and this is responsible for policy direction. It gives all the directions how to apply the policies which are published. And the Court of Justice. The Court of Justice is like any court. When someone doesn't abide by the rule conditions, they apply the law in order to correctly implement it. And here, remember the role in the upcoming slides, the difference between directive and regulation. Here comes the role of the Court of Justice. Okay. And then we have the European Central Bank, which is financial and which gives all the money to support all the new projects. Okay, and we have finally the European Court of Auditors. And auditing meaning when you want to make sure that everything is rightly implemented. Okay, so these auditors are the ones which make sure that the regulation or the directive are implemented. Okay, now all of these members are summarized in this chart, where, as you see, it is it's complicated, but it is very simple. We are not part of the system. We see it's complicated, but it flows fluently. For example, the European Commission draws a proposal for a new European legislation. It goes to the discussion between the Council of European Union and European Parliament. Then it goes to the court. They take the decision. The European Council has executive tasks. It types it and it publishes it. And then all the other members, they are helpers, or they have executive tasks. Okay, and finally, we have the Court of Justice. If the law is not implemented, they come and they step in. Okay, now, and another part or another member or other bodies who are responsible for the implementation of the directives or the regulations and who have hand in the clinical trial legislation are we have some databases or committees which belong also to the whole European Union. You have to imagine the European Union as one country. Okay, now we have the European Medicine Agency, which is the EMA. Probably you have seen this logo. This is the agency which is like the FDA in America. In the US, we have the FDA. In Europe, we have the EMA. Okay, This EMA, I will tell you the EMA, it is resembles what in other, for example, DHA or DOH in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. This is the EMA, okay? It is the European Medicines Agency, and it is a decentralized agency which is for the whole European Union. It is responsible for scientific evaluation. So every medication which has to be registered to have marketing authorization, it makes the scientific evaluation, supervision about all the scientific issues and projects, and safety monitoring, pharmacovigilance, etc. This is like the FDA in America, okay, for all medicines in European Union. Other bodies which are very important and responsible, and we will see their role in the regulation and the directive, are the European Union databases. What are these databases? Probably you have worked with clinical trials, and we have all registered clinical trials like clinicaltrial.gov. Okay, similar to that, we have some bodies in the database or databases in Europe. These databases all begin with a word, EUDRA. Okay, and we have many databases. Each one is specialized for a certain topic. EUDRA meaning European Union Drug Regulatory Agency. This means every time when you see EUDRA, it means that this database is under the patronage of the regulatory body, which is the EMA. Okay, therefore, we have the EUDRA databases are operated and maintained by the EMA, which is wonderful, which means that they have the high power over them, which means they are highly validated and highly safe, and they are responsible for the implementation and legislation requirements. For example, we have EUDRA Act, okay? We have EUDRA Lex, EUDRA CT. EUDRA CT meaning EUDRA clinical trial. This EUDRA CT, we will talk so much about it when we talk about the application of the clinical trials. Remember it. EUDRA Lex, we have EUDRA Vigilance, we have EUDRA GMP, and EUDRA COVID. I will explain each one. What is it? These are databases under the patronage of EMA. EUDRA CT, it's responsible for, it is copy-paste like clinicaltrials.gov. It is the same. Every clinical trial you have to register in Europe, you have to register it under EUDRA CT, okay? Don't misunderstand now between the old system and the new system. In both systems, it is found, okay? So EUDRA CT is clinicaltrials.gov. Regarding EUDRA Lex, all the rules or the legislation. Can we mute? Sorry, can we mute? Nagam, Habib, please, can we mute Shivangi? Thank you, Shivangi. I'm so sorry. Okay, so all the rules and regulations for medicinal products and veterinary products, they are found in the European Union legislation. For example, when we finish this lecture, you can go to EUDRA Lex, and you can go to the volume number 10. It has 10 volumes, 10 volumes. Volume number 1, which is concerned for the medicinal products for human use, all the rules are there, and volume 5 for the medicinal products of veterinary use. Okay, and you can have all the new clinical trial regulation, which is now applicable and implemented under the EUDRA Lex. Okay, volume 1. EUDRA Vigilance, from the word, everything, it is a database for pharmacovigilance. Every single medication which has a side effect, it is registered under this safety database, which is the EUDRA Vigilance. Okay, these are the most important. We have the EUDRA COVID. I have talked about it. It has been done since 2 years ago, just for the COVID-19 information, latest information. Okay, now. What are the international guidelines? Before we go into the European Union, usually in the whole world, we have certain international guidelines, which are the mother and the father for clinical trials. And from these international guidelines, all the other guidelines have been published or emerged. Okay, the first important one, which is the good clinical trial good clinical practice, the GCP. The GCP is the base for all clinical trial practices, and it is the most important guideline. It is a guideline for the design, for the conduct, for the performance, monitoring auditing, recording, analysis, and reporting of clinical trials. It is a worldwide guideline. And why I am mentioning it? Because this guideline is the base for the directive and the regulation, okay? But each country, it changes it according to its own environment, own type of medications, etc. But it is the seed where all guidelines in all countries have emerged, okay? And definitely you know that the GCP is published by the ICH, which is an international conference of harmonization. There was a conference between many countries, and they have come up with the good clinical practice. And not only with this GCP, they have come up with many others, okay? So the GCP, as we said, it is a guideline, and worldwide, we have regulatory agencies and organizations around the world, not only the EMA. Now today we will talk about we will talk about Europe. I don't know what's happening. Okay, today we will talk about Europe, okay, because we are talking about the clinical trial regulation. But in general, let me give you a small idea about the regulatory agencies and organizations around the world. We have, for example, in North America and Central America, the USA and Canada. We have Food and Drug Administration in the US. Sorry, the laptop is okay. We have the Food and Drug Administration in the US. We have in Canada the Health Canada. These are the ones which are similar to the EMA, okay, European Medical Agency. It's an agency, okay. In Costa Rica we have Ministry of Health. In South America we have in the Paraguay Ministry of Health. In Brazil Anvisa. In Europe we have the EMA, or it was called before that EMEA. EMEA before the 1992 European Medicine Evaluation Agency. Then they summarized it into European Medicines Agency. Okay, so I'm giving you this idea so that you can be able to illustrate or to imagine what is the EMA. EMA, it is like any other regulatory body in any country. Okay, Denmark, it is the Danish Medicines Agency. In UK, it is called the MEHRA. Okay. In Sweden, the MPA, Netherlands, the Medicines Evaluation Body, and Irish, it is Irish Medicines Board. So it is like any other, sorry, the laptop is getting crazy. Okay, any other regulatory body. In Italy, it's the Italian Pharmaceutical Agency. In Africa also, each country, it has its own agency. In Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, China. When you watch the recording, you can put it, please, and you can read the names of the agencies. Okay, therefore, so ICH guidelines have come with many topics. The most important were the E6 and the Q7. E6, which is related to the good clinical practice, which is the GCP about clinical trials, and the good manufacturing practice Q7, which is about the manufacturing of medications. Therefore, the directive and the regulation, which I'm going to talk about, has its basis and has its seed from these two guidances or guidelines. Okay, now, before I continue, I have been talking about directive regulation. What is the difference between directive and a regulation? Okay, the directive, there is a big and huge difference. Regulation have a binding legal force. That is, it is a force enforced legally by the law. That is, if you do not apply to this, you can go to court, you can go to prison, you can go to jail. It is a binding legal force throughout every member state, which enters into force on a set date, meaning that when the European Union publishes a regulation and it gives a date for implementing it. By the way, when we give a regulation, we give a certain period of time in order to implement it, to put it in action. Why? So that people can arrange everything logistically, everything. Okay, you cannot today put a regulation and tomorrow they have to abide to it. Okay, no. So regulations which are published by the EMA, okay, or European Union, they are, by the European Parliament, as we remember, and the Council and the Commission, they are by law. You have to abide them by law, okay? And they are directly applicable and come into force without any national implementation measures, meaning that each country has its own law, but this law is above the law of this country. It has, all the countries has to abide to it. On the other hand, the directive, it's only an instruction. It is optional. You can either take it or leave it. This is a very big difference, okay? A very big difference. When you have a directive, I give it to you, it is only an instruction, a guideline. You have, it is just optional. You have the option to abide to it or to delete it, okay? On the other hand, the regulation is pressured by the law, okay? Now, this is the difference. And now I will explain between the difference between we had a directive at the European Union, and then we are now with a regulation. You can imagine that it was optional, and then now it was by law. And we will see why it became by law, why it is enforced. There is a reason for that. Okay, so let us talk about some history of the clinical trial legislation. Legislation meaning the rules. Okay, so in 1965, or let us say before 2001, in 1965, they had the European Economic Community had many.
I have a question, please.
Yes, sure.
I want to ask why we are interested in the European rules. Why we are studying that specifically. I want to know the core.
Sorry, Gihad, can we please, sorry, I appreciate your question, but can we leave all the questions at the end of the lecture? Okay?
Okay,
please.
okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, at all, no, at all. But please, if you want, write it down, and at the end we will have 15 minutes, and I will reply to all the questions. Okay, please.
Okay, thanks.
You are welcome. Okay, so the European Union directive in the 1965, there was a directive. As we know, there were different countries. There was no European Union. Okay, it was only a directive, and it didn't work at all because each country had its own. There were no rules. By the way, there were no rules, and there were many medical disasters. Okay, there were many medical disasters. Clinical trials took place on people without consent forms. There were even very, very few clinical trials. Now, at the 1995, the European Medicines Agency was born. Okay, when it was born, it has worked over a long number of years for something called the European Union Directive 2001. Okay, European Union Directive 2001. When I say published, it's different from implemented. This directive, after this long period from 1965 to 2001, no rules. Every single company was authorizing medications at its own pace, no rules, nothing. Okay, so they have come in 2001 and they have put something called the directive. They tried to implement it to standardize and harmonize the clinical trials approval. What happened is that each country had to submit a file for regulatory bodies, for example, Ministry of Health, as well as the ethics committee. So imagine if a medication was to be distributed all of Europe. Novartis company, for example, it had to go to distribute, to apply 27 files to 27 countries. And these files are doubled, 27 files to 27 regulatory authorities and 27 ethics committees. So can you imagine lots of paperwork, different rules, different regulations, different insurance premiums, different timelines. For example, this country will take 6 months in order to reply and approve. The other country, 3 months. Other country, open dates, no, they don't know. So clinical trials were a mess. Okay, we have put this 2001 directive, but it was still a mess. Okay, this directive, they tried to improve it. So in 2003, they laid down the principles of GMP inside this directive in order to improve it, trying to improve the problems inside the directive. Still there were problems. And in 2004, as you see, the directive was published in 2001. They were given three years period, and in 2004 it took action. Okay, before taking action, they try to improve it. They have involved in it the GMP rules. Okay, so it was implemented in 2004, and then in 2005 they have added to it the good clinical practice for investigational medicinal products. Okay, every time they are adding new rules. In spite of all that, from 2001 until 2004, they were trying to improve and improve, but they didn't reach any solution, and the problem added over and over again. Why? Let us see why and which are the issues with this directive 2001. And this is the lecture, our lecture today, about the exchange between 2001, the directive, and today the regulation 2014, which was published in 2014 but implemented in January 31, 2022. Okay, so what were the problems and the issues? First of all, multinational studies, meaning studies taking place in many countries, require a single sponsor. Okay, even when it is investigator initiated, but researchers from different countries work together on equal footing. So this was a very big problem. Okay, they needed one sponsor for different multinational studies, which was difficult at that time, because sometimes investigators the clinical trial investigator initiated and the sponsor initiated. Especially in the investigator initiated clinical trials, they find a very huge problem in that. Second thing with the directive and why they changed to the regulation, although the directive relates to clinical medicinal research, in some countries the directive has been applied to research with medical devices or observational research, and this was also a problem for them. Okay, so this is adding to the problem. A third thing is that the administrative procedure, which is the main problem, the main problem. The administrative procedures in the individual member states, as you know, 27 member states. For example, Novartis is going to have market authorization for 15 countries. The individual member states vary, the rules vary, medical ethics committee varies, competent authorities varies. It took them tens and 20s of years in order to have marketing authorization for one medication. So it was a huge burden, so much paperwork, so much applications, so much data entry. It was crazy. Okay, then varying implementation of the directive in each country. This is related to the first point. When you take the marketing authorization for this country, you have to have different packaging, different ways of distribution, different rules from different countries. And the directive itself, 2001, was not implemented the same at each country. Each country implemented it according to its own rules, which was hugely difficult for companies. But then the amount of paperwork was high. Industry reported that it is costing more time and money. And what proves that is that the number of clinical trials have decreased hugely between 2001 until 2014. Clinical trials for children have immensely decreased due to different rules and different conditions. Okay, this is it. A decrease of around 25% in the number of investigator initial protocols have decreased also, and no more investigator initiated protocols because they have to apply to different authorities. And another problem is that the conditions and coverage for the insurance of the trial subject varied greatly between member states, and this affected the price of the medication. You go to Norway, for example, this country X, you find that the medication is double the price of country Y. Why? Because different rules, different bureaucracy, different conditions, insurance, etc. And finally, there was a huge variation in the definition of medicinal research. And when you have different definitions, you cannot apply the same protocol and the same clinical trial protocol for all the countries. Imagine carrying out 15 clinical trial protocols for one drug and for one indication or for one outcome. It was crazy. What happened is that, and finally, there was no distinction between the conditions for submitting or carrying out research with non-registered or registered medication. For example, you have a registered medication and you only want to change the dose, or you want to change add an indication. So you have to go from the beginning. It is the same as if it is not registered. It was crazy. Okay, it was crazy. And finally, did this Directive 2001 reach its objective in harmonizing clinical trials in Europe? No. So what did they do? What did they do? It didn't hit their target in harmonizing clinical trials. They tried to have some help. They tried to look for some help, and they came up with the European Clinical Trial Regulation in 2014, which was a law. That directive was a directive, Directive 2001. Now it is a law. It became a law after 13 years. It is Regulation 536/2014. Okay, and this regulation was the escape from all the problems between 2001 and 2014. Between all these problems, imagine 25% of clinical trials have decreased. Okay, and this regulation was voted for, was presented, was published, sorry, was presented, voted for, and published in 2014, and they gave them until 2022 in order to implement it, in order to put it in action. And this regulation replaced this directive. It was not by law, it was optional, and now it was by law. And when it is by law now, we can know that it is mandatory and obligatory. And it took action in 31 January 2022. It took action in all countries. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of this European Union clinical trial regulation, which came after 13 years after the directive? First of all, we had, as we know, as we said, the previous legislation, this directive, and it was replaced by this regulation. And this is applicable to all member states. It is not optional. You want to be a member of the European Union, you have to apply to this regulation. Okay. Now, what is the clinical trial regulation? What does it talk about? What is it? It is a regulation, okay, and it is abbreviated as the CTR, Clinical Trial Regulation. Now, the full title of the regulation is this one, regulation number okay, on clinical trials on medicinal products for human use, repealing Directive 2001, meaning taking place of 2001, Directive 2001. This is its title. Its content, it is made up of 76 pages, this regulation. It has 85 points, which are the summary of the regulation, and it has 19 chapters. Each chapter has many articles, okay? And in all, the 19 chapters contain 99 articles and 7 annexes. Annexes are the extra sections at the end, like appendices, which are explanatory, which has a new extra explanation of ideas in these chapters. Okay, now and download the whole regulation. Okay, now the chapters, I'm not through the chapters at all, don't worry and don't freak. I'm just giving you the titles of the chapters so that you can have an idea about what is this regulation talking about. And definitely in the upcoming slides, I will give you the difference between the regulation and the directive and what was the main difference between both. First of all, they talk about general provisions. Provisions are laws, okay? Then in chapter 2, these are 3 articles from article 1 to 3, and this is the number of articles. Articles like sections, okay? Then we have authorization procedure for a clinical trial. What is the procedure? How to authorize it? How to authorize a clinical trial? Then authorizing it, meaning giving it the green light to begin. Okay, you cannot begin a clinical trial unless you have an authorized approval from the authorities. Okay, then authorization for substantial modification of a clinical trial. For example, when you have a clinical trial which is running and you want to make some modifications in it, number of participants, adding a new objective, whatever, you have to apply for another authorization. This is the procedure, and this substantial modification. Application dossier, what are the things which are, what are the documents related to the application dossier which are contained in the application dossier to apply to present them. Protection of subjects and informed consent. This is regarding the ethics, okay, informed consent. Then start and temporary halt, yani stop or freeze, and early termination of a clinical trial. As you see, it's covering all aspects in one rule for all countries. Okay. Now, safety reporting in the context of a clinical trial. Safety reporting meaning pharmacovigilance. We go now to chapter 8, which is conduct of a clinical trial, supervision, sponsor roles, training, experience, auxiliary medicinal products. Then manufacturing, we come to the manufacturing, GMP, relation of GMP or GCP to the, GMP, sorry, to the regulation, manufacturing and import of investigation medicine products at all times in the directive times. Each country had its own emballage or packaging. When we used to go and get a medication from France, and then we get someone and same medication from Italy, we have different boxes, okay? The same medication, different emballage, but now it has a unified emballage. This, let me tell you something. This decreases the what we say, the expenses on the sponsor or on the company, manufacturing company. Labeling, the same label on all packages. Sponsor and investigator, this is a section related to them. Damage compensation, there happens a damage and how to compensate. Supervision by member states, union inspections and controls. This is related to the auditing part, where the whole process is supervised by the member state itself, the country, and who is supervising the supervision of the country, the EMA, which is the European Medical Medicine Agency. And then we have the IT infrastructure. If you want to switch from the directive to the regulation, you have to change the IT structure in your company. You go to this section and you take all the information. And cooperation between, sorry, this is 15, not chapter 5, 15. Cooperation between member states and fees, implementing acts and delegated acts, miscellaneous provisions, different rules. Now, and final provisions, the final rules. It is a lengthy one, but it is very useful. Now the annexes, as I said, the explanatory sections. Application dossier for initial application. Initial application, it is when you have medication and you are applying it for the first time for it, or a clinical trial for the first time. Okay, so the application dossier, they give you as a template, what is it and what does it contain. Okay, then the second one, the application dossier for substantial modification. If you have already an already running clinical trial and you have to make a modification in it. Okay, then we have the Annex 3 safety reporting, the template, content of the summary results, the clinical study report content. These are all templates, okay? And content of the summary of the results of clinical trial for laypersons. As you know, you have to make a clinical study report or summary results in the scientific language, and that, or in the layperson, the common language for people to understand, okay? And then labeling for investigation medicine products, they have put samples of labels, okay? And finally, the correlation table. Correlation table, it is a complex table where if you are in this stage, what you have to do, okay, or where you have to apply, okay? This is the structure of the regulation, the new regulation. Now, what is its objective? Very briefly, I highlighted the keywords. I will not read all. First of all, its objective is the safety of the people or the participants. Different rules in different countries don't ensure the safety of participants. We have one rule, it is one rule, all participants have abide for these standards and they are safe. Then second, they are transparency. When you have the same rule applying to all, you can compare. But if I have different rules, how can I know that this is better than that, okay? Then efficiency, submission and assessment, the process is more efficient because it's more quick. Now we will know we will know why, because instead of applying 27 applications, now you are applying one. Can you imagine, instead of applying 27 apps for the regulatory and 27 files for the committee, ethics committee, 54 all in all applications, you are applying one for the ethics committee and one for the regulatory, now we'll know who. Okay, so it made their life much easier in the submission and in the assessment. When you want to assess a file, imagine you are waiting for 27 people to reply to you in order to know or sometimes what happened is that when this member state replied, they began this clinical trial here. After 1 year, they get the reply from other member state. The clinical trial here ended. Now the same clinical trial begins at another member state. It was at the end, all the data was outdated actually. Okay, then harmonize the authorization, meaning that you have one authority giving you one reply, yes or no. Okay, not 27. Okay, then it provides common provisions governing CTs across member states. The member states themselves, they are now resting assured and they are very happy we have one rule that is applying to all, because sometimes they had clashes between companies. Why are you dealing with us with that? They tell them because the rule at your, for example, about the prices of the medications, they used to nag about that. Why the price here, it's different. They tell them that the operational costs in your country is different from the operational costs in others. Okay, okay, and it improves the cooperation between member states. At the beginning, when you have two different, for example, I am graduated from the American University of Beirut. If I want to go to another country where there is no cooperation between the educational system and I want to make equivalence for my degrees, I will suffer. But if there is an understanding, memorandum of understanding between my country and other countries, when I go to the other Ministry of Health, it will be a smooth process, okay? So when you want to distribute drugs, when you have to import, export drugs between countries, it improves the cooperation, okay? And definitely one of its, it gave detailed guidelines for the informed consent process. There were different informed consent processes in different countries, therefore this didn't guarantee the safety of people, okay, of participants. I keep saying people, okay? Now, and finally, it introduced something new, which is risk-adapted approach to the clinical trials. They approached everything, they approached everything with a risk-adapted way, okay? It is something, it is a huge topic. We can make a presentation out of it for a webinar one day, okay? And finally, which is most important of all, there now in the regulation, there is a head, there is a regulatory body which controls everything, which supervises, which tells you you are wrong or you are right, which takes you to jail if you do something wrong, if you play with the results of clinical trials, if you do not carry the clinical trials on the same basis. Okay, so this is the most important part. There is patronage, okay, regulatory body, one regulatory body. Okay, who will benefit from the CTR? The CTR, which is the clinical trial regulation, the new one. Who will be happy for that? Who will be, whose life or for whom it will make life easy? It will make life easy for authorities, definitely. We have one body of authority, member states, competent authorities, etc. It will make life easy for sponsors and pharma and industry, and it will make life easy for general public, okay? For research associates, for media, they can have one. Imagine I want to know what is the, I want to know side effects of medication X, which was manufactured by Novartis in European Union country, okay? I have to bring 27 reports because they will have 27 different reports of side effects, okay? So as a general person, I want to know if this medication is good or bad. Now I have one report, which is the hypervigilance. I go and I take it and I know everything about this medication. Okay, now, what are the main characteristics and provisions of the new regulation? We talked here in these slides first about what it will do. Now we will talk about the characteristics of this regulation. First of all, what do I mean here by in scope and not in scope? In scope meaning, what does it include, or it applies to what? And not include in scope, it does not apply to what? Okay, so the clinical trial regulation applies to interventional clinical trials with medicinal products for human use. Therefore, every interventional clinical trial with MPI is under the clinical trial regulation. Second, The clinical trial regulation applies for low intervention clinical trials, which is a type of intervention, which is a type of clinical trials where we have the low intervention clinical trials are clinical trials with authorized products already, they are authorized, or if the IMP not used in accordance with terms of the marketing authorization. Okay, you supported by publish. This is very technical. Don't think of it. Okay, so it applies to interventional and low interventional clinical trials. Okay. Now, also, the low interventional clinical trials are the clinical trials with minimal additional risk or burden to the safety of subjects compared to normal clinical trials. These are the three criteria where you can say that this trial is a low intervention clinical trial. So it applies to these two types of clinical trials. What is not in scope or it doesn't apply to non-intervention trials, for example, observational studies, cohort, etc. These do not go under the CTR. They have their own rules in each country, and they are not so important. Clinical trials are the important ones. And trials without medicinal products, for example, trials for surgery, trials for devices, still they are under the old directive. Okay, now, significant changes. This is the most important part and the most interesting part. And this is the most highlighted part about this lecture. What are the key changes? The key changes from the Directive 2001 to Regulation number 536. First of all, multiple submissions were taking place in the directive. For one trial, one submission per trial, sorry, multiple submissions per trial, one submission per each MSC, no harmonized dossier. They had loads and loads of paperwork, multiple submissions, 27. I am applying to 5 countries, 5 applications, actually 10, because in each country I apply to the authority, a Ministry of Health, as well as to the ethics committee. Okay. On the other hand, in the regulation, single electronic application to all MSCs, harmonized dossier for one trial. For one trial, I have 2 applications, which are one in one dossier, application for 27 countries. Once I get the authorization for this application, I can directly market my medication, distribute it, sell it, whatever I do in 27 countries. Can you imagine the stress that they removed from the countries, from the companies? Then we had double submission. As I said, in each country here, you had in the directive double submission to the MSC, to the NCA, National Competent Authority, and the Ethics Committee. Here we have single submission, one submission, which is through a system called the CTI. I will talk about it, and it splits the file to the National Competent Authority and the Ethics Committee. Okay. Individual assessment. Each file has to be studied and assessed by each MSC, and no definite timeline. Here we have joint assessment. Okay, all the countries, they have access, the regulatory bodies, they have access to the site. I will talk about it later. So only one assessment. No single decision. Here in the directive, you can have different decisions. Some countries approve, some countries no. Here we have one MSC decision, meaning that you have one decision, either all approve or all disapprove. Okay. Burden to NCAs. There was a lot of burden to the non-competent authorities themselves, meaning that uploading information in the system and following up files and having passwords, etc. Here, distribution of burden among the users, meaning that when, for example, here, what I mean burden to NCAs, each country has its NCA working. So at the same time, you have 27 NCAs working. Here, you have only one NCA representative from each one working for one file. Okay. Now, limited UDRA-CT data availability to the public. At the beginning, UDRA-CT, remember, it is like clinicaltrials.gov. Information to the public was limited. On the other hand, in order to improve transparency, public view for all clinical trial related information. You can today, after this lecture, go and enter into the CTIS, and I will tell you how you enter it, and you can look at all the running clinical trials in the European countries. and you can access them. Definitely, there are parts that you can access and parts which have limited access due to the confidentiality of information. Okay, now, what is the CTIS? Where do we apply? What is the program that we apply to it? Okay, it is called the CTIS, which is the Clinical Trial Information System. They have made this software and they have called it the CTIS. Who have produced this software? The European Medicines Agency. The Clinical Trial Information System was designed and hosted and now maintained by the European Medicines Agency. And this is the one which hosts this CTIS. And this is the system where this one file from this sponsor, I am a Novartis company, I go, I open the CTIS, I upload my file, and it's distributed, okay, to one authority committee, one authority and one ethics committee, and I have the reply, and when the decision, I have it, it is the decision for 27 countries, okay? What are the key components of this clinical trial CTIS? It has a European Union portal and database. This is a portal where you enter your information. Don't panic. This is only, I'm showing you how it is so complicated, and I will simplify it in other slides, okay? We have the European Union portal where this is a single entry point for submission of the data, and it is responsible for trial-related communication between the sponsor and the authorities. And we have the database, which contains all the data in this portal, okay? I will simplify it here, okay? Let us skip this, okay. This is the CTIS program. You go into the CTIS program. We have two workspaces when you enter the CTIS program. You have a secure access space where if you don't have a password, you cannot enter. And you have an open access space, which is open to the public. Now, tonight, you can go and you can enter the public website, okay? Now, the sponsor workspace or in the secure access workspace, it is related to the sponsors and the authority, meaning that Novartis, for example, and the authority of the EMA, okay? Now, the sponsor workspace, it goes under, or it's related to the sponsors and marketing authorization applicants, all the people who are sponsoring or who are applying, individual applicants. You are running a clinical trial, you are an individual researcher, and you apply through the sponsor workspace. On the other hand, the authority workspace, it is related to the member states, the NCAs. In each member state, there is a committee, the national committee, okay? We have the European Commission and the European Medicines Agency, all of these three under the authority workspace. And in the public workspace, it is open to the general public, okay? I want to tell you that to access the CTIS restricted workspace, if you are a sponsor, you have to go to the EMA account. You have to enter something called EMA account management system. We cannot do it because you don't have a password. You have to obtain credentials via the EMA account and have access to the CTIS system as Novartis. And when you have your password, you can access it and you can upload your files. Okay? And all the data, I wanted to say, it is restricted and it is confidential. Okay? Now, in order to log into the CTIS, as I told you, if you are an authority, for example, EMA, not EMA, for example, authority, the ones who are accessing the file and the people who are in the authority and who are accessing the file to evaluate it, they enter through member state user and put username and password, and the sponsor, they have a sponsor user. Okay. Now, this CTIS, it has functionalities. What are the functionalities of this program? It has a program, tabs. Okay. You can go, you have a tab to overview clinical trials. You have a tab for notices and alerts. I will show you. You have a tab for user management. I will explain. And you have the annual safety reporting tab, meaning that when you enter the CTIS, okay, if you are a sponsor, you can find these tabs. If you are an authority, you can find these tabs. If you are a sponsor, you can look at the clinical trials, you click them, and you enter a new clinical trial. You look at the notices, you have a notice from the, for example, a document which is returned, not good. Upload your annual safety reporting. Clinical trials, they annually have safety reporting. Okay, you upload them here. And user administration, I am at Novartis, I am a sponsor. I want to put Dr. Nagam as a user to enter and work. She has a role, so I put her under the user administration. I go and I administer the users. Okay, these are for you to read only. I already talked about these now. Okay, the clinical trials, if you see, you can go here and you can see all the names of the clinical trials. You can access them by date, by topic, etc. Okay, and these are the numbers of these clinical trials. It is a list of the whole clinical trials. This is very technical. I just mentioned it if you want to watch the video, the recording. These are the and these are the status of each clinical trial. For example, this is authorized, this is authorized, maybe in process, etc. Okay. Now, notices and alerts. Notices are messages to inform the user of an event. For example, you have to apply this thing. Now you are at the process of recruitment. Okay. Alerts, if you have to make an action, you have now to submit your report. Okay, so these are examples of notices and alerts. User management, as I said, user administration, you can put people and give them different roles. Okay, and the annual safety report, it has to be submitted after 1 year of the clinical trial. You submit it here. Okay, I want to mention that the data is so confidential in the CTR, and the only data that is not shared by the not shared by the lay people is the personal protected data. Protected personal data is confidential information of the medicinal product itself. You cannot go and access it if you are a competitor, another sponsor. And confidential communication between member states and the sponsor. You cannot access these. Only each person accesses his own information about medicinal products and communication. Okay, now I just want to talk about, this is very important. I think this is the topic before the last, transition period. As we know, the clinical trial directive has taken place in 2001 and it was implemented in 2014. The directive has been replaced by the regulation in 2014 and there was a transition period. Okay, now the regulation has started taking place in January 31, 2022. Okay, the first year, this whole year, you can still submit clinical trials under the old directive or the new regulation. Listen to this very carefully, and I will put a slide on that. During the whole year, it is implemented in 31 January 2022. You can still choose either to go and submit according to the old directive or the new regulatory system. Now, the years 2 and 3, which is 23 and 24, 2023, 2024, all the trials authorized under the old system will remain under that old system and they will be deleted if you do not change them, okay? Or if you do not submit them. And new trials submitted under the new regulation system. All the new trials, they don't have any choice. They have to be resubmitted under the new system. The trials which are already authorized under the old system, if you don't change them, you will lose them, okay? After 3 years from 2022, all clinical trials will switch from the new regulation, old ones, and the new ones will be under the new regulation. So this means in 3 years period, they gave them a transition period. In 3 years period, all clinical trials will be under fully 100% under the new regulation. And this is a chart you can refer to. Okay. Evaluation of a clinical trial application. There is a process when you submit your application into the clinical trial CTIS. We have 3 steps. We have the validation. They have to see if your trial is valid, if your dossier is valid. Then they have to, after they see it, it's valid, they have to assess it. They have first assessment, second assessment, part 1, part 2, and then there is this decision, the decision. I will explain it in this. This is the validation. And the most important part in the regulation is that now we have timeline, definite timeline. They give you beyond this timeline, this regulatory body will be asked to submit. Okay, they have 10 days for the validation to validate your file. They have 45 days for the assessment part 1 and part 2, and I will explain what is part 1 and part 2. And they have 5 days to give the decision. Okay, what is this plus 31 and plus 15? Plus 15, it is extra time if they take your file and they find it is missing a paper, it is missing something. So they give you an alert or notice, you go, you bring the paper, you upload it back. You have maximum, it stretches this maximum 25 days, okay? And this stretches maximum to 76 days. Here, if also there is a problem in the trial, take and back and forth, back and forth. These are extra days for the trials which have back and forth, okay? The most important part is that we have definite timeline. This is the explanation. We have the CTA submission. You submit it through the European Union portal, which is the CIS system. Then you have a reporting member state. They elect a member state. For example, you have in your application, you want to have a marketing authorization in 5 countries. When you apply, you have the names of these 5 countries. They make a certain procedure. I will not talk about it. It's a very lengthy procedure in order to elect one country from these to be the reporting member state. The reporting member state is the one who will speak for all, in name of all. Okay. Now, this validation will take 10 days. Then the file is undergoing 2 types of assessment. Assessment, which is regarding the file, each here the validation is meaning that if the file contains the required documents, they don't look inside the document. Okay, now the first part of assessment here, they look at inside each document. The cover letter is okay, the application form is okay, the protocol, they study it in details, etc. And the second part, and these go parallel with each other, okay? The second part is the assessment for the ethics regarding meaning informed consent, suitability of centers, data protection, recruitment activities, etc. So these run in parallel. After these take place, okay, at the same time, if you see 45 days plus 31, they run in parallel. They will come up with a decision. Either they approve, they give you authorization to begin your clinical trial, and you begin it, and they will notify you, okay, and you can begin your clinical trial. It's as simple as that. Can you imagine how it improved their life? And this is a very detailed with the days and the times of the. It's a very important one. It is the same as this one, but detailed, okay. And the CTA decision, the clinical trial application decision, it can be authorized. They tell you begin the trial. It can be authorized according to certain conditions. Change this, change that, or rejection. It's rejected, and they will tell you why. Okay. When does the sponsor need to submit the trial results? The sponsor need to submit within 1 year of the end of the clinical trial CTA. You have to submit the results. At the old directive, there was no timeline. Sometimes clinical trial sponsors, they didn't submit results until 5 to 6 years. Okay, now only 1 year, and within 6 months for the pediatric trials. Okay, now in order to prepare for the this clinical trial regulation, this is the last part and 3-4 slides, and we are on time. Challenges, there were many challenges for the companies. They were so happy with this trial, but also there were more challenges for them. Why? The companies have to be compliant, have to understand the new regulation, have to have knowledge about it, modify systems to ensure the information. You know, sometimes we are in old rules and old regulations, we are miserable, but at the same time, it's our comfort zone. I don't have the energy or the effort to change. But in order to change, this has put very much stress on the companies. And these companies, they have to look at the regulatory part, they have to Many departments are involved in these companies: regulatory departments, compliance departments, IT departments, clinical operation departments. They were involved in the change process. And in order to be able to change this process, these companies or sponsors had to ask question: what are the major differences between European Union Clinical Trial Directive and European Union CTR? By the way, it is not only companies, even the investigators, independent investigators, because they have to apply to the new rule. What is the difference? Second thing, how do I build a team that can define and manage these impacts? Okay. And then how should we approach this transitional period? Why? Now Novartis have 5, 6, or 7, whatever. I'm always saying Novartis. I don't know why. Not Novartis. Any other country. Roche, for example. Roche, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 trials running. They are applied according to the old directive. Now we are under the patronage of the new regulation. What will happen in this transitional period? It is a real mess. And in order to overcome this mess, there have to be many steps to be taken. Organizational alignment is important to understand the clinical trial regulation and its objectives. Assessment phase to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment across the organizational structure, design future state, right people, process, technology. The transition phase, they have to assess change and training needed to people for this responsibility and role, new role, and to develop a detailed change management plan. Okay, and finally, to enable this phase, to put solutions to enable CTR, to deploy process changes, implement ongoing review and improvement. And by the way, only 5 or 6% till now, from January till now, 5 to 6% of the companies are ready for that. They are still taking training. I have given this training over 3 days in Europe for companies in order to understand. I have given this 1.5 hour training over 3 days, full days. Okay, can you imagine? And other colleagues have given it over 7 days. It's very lengthy. So it is a huge challenge, but it is a promising challenge toward the future. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you so much for IVPN, for Nagham, for everyone who has participated in this wonderful webinar. I want to thank you all, and I am ready for all the questions. Thank you so much, Nagham. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sama, for this most professional and informative one lecture. Really, I enjoyed it for myself, and I hope the audience enjoyed it too. So the room now is open for any question.
Dr. Miss or Mr. Jihad Al Derby was asking a question. Hello.
Yes,
hello.
I'm with you.
Yes, Habibi. I'm sorry for not taking the question previously.
No problem.
Okay.
I want to thank you for this lecture. Although it's about regulations and that things is usually complicated and so poor. You feel poor when listening it, but your lecture was so simple and so interesting. Your slide was so clear. But I want to ask about. I'm expecting to know more about the clinical trial in terms of the design and randomization. Are these points will be covered in the next lecture, or it will all about regulation? And also, I wonder to know this content will I can get benefit from it when I am in a European country or other places other than outside Europe.
Okay. First, let me reply to the first question. The first question is that in this series, I am the one who is giving this lecture about regulation. We want the answer of Dr. Nagham if she will cover other sessions related to the clinical trial rules and regulations. And it is important if you are interested in that. Now, when I finish, we will. Nagham, will you give? Will you answer this first part?
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Jihad, for bringing this topic. If you are interested, we can cover all of the regulation. If they are
no, she's not interested in the regulation. She's interested in the study design, clinical trial study design, right, Jihad?
Okay.
Yes, yes.
For the
Yes.
study design, we already had one, like a very beautiful one, and you can view the library. I will put the library link in the chat box, so you can check
Okay,
it, and you have all of the lecture are recorded. We have like
okay,
2 lecture about the study design, and they are amazing, to be honest.
okay, okay. Thank
Okay.
you, Nagam.
You are welcome. Thank you, Nagam. But related to the second part, Jihad, to be honest, yes, this lecture is purely related to the European Union countries, but affects us. For example, I am working as a consultant for other pharmaceutical companies, and when this
Yeah.
regulation was put in implementation, it affected our communication with them, or our reports, or everything. Okay, so as a researcher, you have to know the clinical trial or the regulations all over the world related to this field. Okay, and
Okay.
definitely, as you know, pharmaceutical companies work the best work so much in Europe and USA. This is their home, Europe and USA. Okay, so it is not logical not to know this if you are a researcher and in this field. And if you go to work in pharmaceutical companies, they usually take even if simple medical rep, they usually take their medical reps to trainings in Europe and the mother companies in Europe. So you have to be exposed to this type of discrepancy or difference between our clinical trials and theirs. Okay. And
Okay,
I
thank
want to
you.
say something. You are most welcome, dear. And I want to say something. It is from the number of attendees who are 15 only. You can notice that it is a very specific topic. Okay. And it is
Yeah.
really people are interested in this topic, and it's very important to know it. Okay. Because everything is connected in this world related to health sector. Okay. For example, let me tell you something. I am the ambassador of a Global Pharmacovigilance Society, and we had an alert for a drug medication which had a very severe side effect last week. So I wanted to report it in the UDRA vigilance. If I didn't know these new systems, okay, from my own country, I cannot report it. Okay, so you have to know if you are in the field.
Okay, thank you. Thank
You
you,
are most welcome.
Dr.
You are most
Sama,
welcome,
Dr.
dear. You are most welcome. Any other questions, please? And if you want certain topics, you can definitely communicate with Dr. Nagam. She is highly open to new topics, and you are always most welcome. Nagam, any other questions, or we are done?
Yeah, we can almost done. If there is no more question in the chat box, I did not see
Yes.
any
Yes.
question, but